Welcome to PsychSessions AI, a podcast dedicated to discussing the impacts of AI on the field of psychology. My name is Joe Slade, and I study AI teaching and learning at Oregon State University. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are joined by Laura Freberg. Laura is a professor of psychology at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. Laura is teaching these days introductory psychology, biopsychology. Welcome, Laura.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. I'm happy to be here.
I wonder if you could start maybe with just a little bit more bio background and maybe AI kind of initial feelings too.
Well, I think I'm just one of those technophilia people. It's like, ooh, shiny, I got to try it. And so AI is like my newest, I would say, passion. I don't consider myself an expert in it. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, but when you're trying to keep on top of the neuroscience literature, that's sort of consuming, and it's moving pretty quickly these days, and so is the AI. So I'm just trying to listen to a lot of smart people around me who are interested in the same things.
And you and I have kind of been back and forth about AI topics for a little while now, and you recently introduced me to this California State University AI initiative.
Yes.
That seems like a big deal.
It is a big deal. We got this kind of blanket announcement about a week ago that the CSU, which is the largest, I believe, college system in the world, the 23 campuses, we made this big deal with Silicon Valley. That would include ChatGPT, OpenAI. Microsoft is involved. There are quite a few different entities involved. And we're going to be the AI system, at least as far as our chancellor is concerned. Now, none of us really know quite what that means right now, but they're going to be providing all students, faculty, and staff with free tools. And so instead of me paying $20 a month for my Chat GPT, because back in the day, somebody told me it was worth getting the pay for version. And so I did that. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a professor. $20 a month to me is different than $20 a month to my students. So they're all going to get that same product for free. And there's going to be a lot of training, we're told, that will be made available. And so there's like a student portal and a faculty portal. None of it's really been populated yet. So we're kind of holding our breath. And then the interesting thing, hearing from some of my colleagues around the system, that some of them are like on academic senate tech committees, and they didn't know this was coming. This was just like kind of a finished product, put in front of us. So really, we're all kind of just waiting. But apparently, it's all going to be in place this spring sometime. So stay tuned.
Wow.
It should be interesting. But they want us to be, a leader, in terms of workforce preparation and the way we do our teaching. So I'm kind of interested to see how it goes. I did take one CSU Chancellor's Office course last spring, I think. And it was on just kind of basics of AI in the classroom. Very, very useful. I had very low expectations for it, but it was put together by some faculty at Monterey Bay, and they just did a terrific job. And so if the training looks more like that, I'm going to be pretty excited about it.
Do you know who's putting out the training? Is that coming from the industry partners or Centers for Teaching and Learning? Or
don't know. I hope it's kind of a cooperative thing, because the tech guys know tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may have been students, but a lot of them just kind of skip that part. So they don't necessarily know what it is we do and what we need from them. So I hope there's a conversation. So we could certainly be a good collaborator in that. So hopefully they do pick some brains from the faculty, but that remains to be seen.
I know we have, we're kind of Microsoft partners. And so as part of that, we have Bing Copilot that is like the enterprise version. So they don't use our prompts for training data.
Oh, I think ours is going to be sort of like that. They call it Chat GPT EDU. And then, but Microsoft is part of this, and there's just a whole list. If you go out, all you have to do is search CSU AI Initiative, and there's this whole list of partners. It's pretty much everybody. So we're all kind of wondering, well, we don't have any money, Joe, right now. I don't know if, I mean, the fires kind of burnt up the California budget, and we don't even know the full extent of how awful that's going to be for all of those people. I
Hmm.
grew up in LA, so I'm kind of like, I hiked Eaton Canyon, so it's very heartbreaking. But yeah, we're kind of like, where's that money coming from? That can't be for free. I don't think it's for free.
Never is. Yeah, let's see. I'm just reading off of
Yeah.
that link. You said Adobe,
Mm.
Alphabet, so Google, AWS, Amazon, IBM, Instructure, Intel, LinkedIn, Microsoft, NVIDIA, OpenAI. It's a lot. That's all the heavy hitters that I could think of.
I was gonna say it's a kind of a who's who. So I'm kind of curious as to what those meetings must have been like, right? Go
Hmm.
figure. But I think it's important, because I know at Cal Poly we're in a little bit different situation because we have a huge engineering presence and one of the better computer science. I mean, we're 200 miles south of Silicon Valley, right? Um, so we have really good computer science faculty and students, and so it makes sense, especially at our campus, to have those tools available because we train those students more cheaply than companies can, right? So it's kind of a
Hmm.
win-win. And so maybe they're looking at it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, you get them hooked on Adobe products early on, and
Exactly.
maybe they're
Yeah.
Adobe for life.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, I've heard of that. Did you call it Chat EDU? Is
Yeah,
that
it's
right?
Chat GPT EDU, something like
Hmm.
that. Yeah, it should be listed if you look at programs or products in the upper menu. It lists all of the different entities that will be cooperating. And I
Hmm.
think what that means is what you're saying is that there's kind of that, and we've talked about that at various conferences you and I have been at, where there's like a dome, kind of a protective dome over the AI use for a particular system. And so the data are not, going anywhere because as a textbook author, I do have a few concerns about the copyright infringement that's made possible by things like ChatGPT, because my students, I know what they're doing. They're uploading my text, just to have it translated or summarized or whatever it is they're doing. And as soon as they do
Hmm.
that, it's out there, right? And so it's kind of like, uh-oh. Because the copyright laws are very vague when it comes to computer generated materials. You can't copyright it.
Yeah. Huh. So maybe we should dive in there. Like you called my attention to a couple of different new AI apps that are, you know, a little bit scary, like Quizzard you named, and
Yep,
then
yep,
what was
yep.
the other one that you
And
just said?
answer
Answers.
answer AI. All right. So they're all extensions. You put them into your browser, and literally you used to have to take a picture with your phone. Like I would get my phone up and take a picture of the question and then it would answer it. But now you don't even have to do that. You just draw a box around the question, and then there's this nice, menu that comes up on the right side of your screen, and it says, well, the question I was looking at with my students today was, which of the following are macroglia? Okay. And it gave you this really nice explanation. It says, well, here's the reason these would be considered macroglia. And then it went into the wrong answers and said, well, no, Purkinje cells are not even glia. It was accurate. It was, as a teaching tool, terrific. So it's like, wait a minute. So, I mean, and that was, it made me think about that question. I go, well, that's a really factual question. That's pretty dumb, really, of me. But, when you're doing like a complex course, like, this is an introduction to behavioral neuroscience, right? So it's kind of, you've never seen this before, maybe a couple days in intro psych, maybe if you're lucky. And so we have to start, with some of the basics. And this is, I guess, if I can segue a little bit, one of my kind of concerns about where the AI is going, because it's a really good example of cognitive offloading, right? So when I'm old enough to know, when we went to handheld calculators, you're not old enough to know that, but it was a big deal. And everybody said, oh, you'll never be able to do math, right? Because you have this calculator, right?
Can
And
you
so
talk more about that? I would love to hear more about that.
well, it was really kind of, it hit me right in graduate school. Okay, the whole controversy. And we were slide ruling, literally. Okay, I actually know how to slide rule. And what amazes me is how hard that is to do. And we put people on the moon, basically, anyway. So it was hard. And so it had many of the same themes, like we have some equity issues. Maybe the CSU initiative kind of thing will get around that. But there's some cost issues involved with the AI, and there were definitely cost issues. The first handheld, like Texas Instrument type scientific calculator back in the day, I remember this because I actually looked at them. They were $750. Well, okay, to put that in today's dollars, my apartment, which wasn't much to look at in Westwood, it was in Westwood, but it was pretty bad. It was $165 a month. So you're talking about,
Mm,
what would that be today? Okay.
mm,
Not quite a car, but pretty close to a car, right? And so what UCLA did is they said, use it at home, if you've got one, if you're lucky enough to have one, but you're not bringing it to class, to use for an exam. And so that was their way of handling the equity. But what was interesting to me is that I have a daughter actually who is a data scientist. She's an operations research systems engineer person. And so math to her is really easy. I'm jealous of that, Joe. I mean, I'm not bad at math, but it works for me. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, mostly tears. And for Kristen, it's like very intuitive, but there's some things that she doesn't do. Like somebody my age, when we go to the store, if we have cash, making change is like something you don't think about. It's just kind of like there. I
mm,
don't know. I guess they just pounded that into us with all those worksheets, dumb worksheets. But today, we don't teach math that way. And so my very brilliant daughter, who can do many things with math that I can't, it's like, what are you doing? How do you know that? So, you know,
yeah.
and
Well, we
so,
don't use change anymore. So I mean,
no, why would you?
typically, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not a loss, but it'll be interesting to see what cognitive offloading is going to look like in a year or two. I kind of got concerned. One of my students, these are my honors students that I was meeting with. So they're from all different majors. And one of them was a computer science student, and he said his roommates, somehow he lost access to his chat GPT. I don't know if he
Mm,
didn't pay for it or he was cut off or something. And this my student said his friend had like this mental breakdown. I mean, he just kind of had like a panic attack, and they actually had to take him to get some treatment. He was just in this total state, and I thought, well, that can't be good, you know, because I mean, your power goes out, you know.
mm,
I mean, a lot could happen, right? And if we're psychologically dependent on this as a tool, like I can't do anything without it. And I think there's
mm,
already I've seen some empirical research looking at that. It's like, one group is given internet access to solve a problem and the other is not. And there are differences in confidence, in feelings of self-efficacy and competence. And so I think we need to keep a close eye on I mean, we're psychologists, right? So we're in a
mm,
really great position to kind of look at the human factors going forward. What is this going to look like, and how do we help people use the tools? Because it's going to be there, right? I mean,
mm.
it's going to be there. And in many ways, I think it's wonderful. I'm pretty excited about it. But we want to make sure nobody has a panic attack, right? That they have to go to the ER or something because their AI didn't work. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Like maybe we could focus on a couple of the main use cases like writing and I know coding, big in both. And
Yeah, well, my students say it's not very good at coding, and I
hmm,
have to take their word for it because, like I said, we have a pretty strong computer science program. But what they do say is it's a time saver. So they can upload what they've done if they have a problem. The output isn't working very well, and the AI generally will troubleshoot it for them. But they say in terms of just saying, hey, I need this, it's like, but I think that's likely to change, right? Because as you work with it, it's going to learn, right? And it's going to get better at what it's doing. And the writing does trouble me because I think, I was taught, and I don't know if there's empirical research behind this, but the way you learn to write is to write.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a heavily practice heavy skill. And I know that, you know, again, I'm going to age myself considerably, but we wrote constantly in high school. I mean, our teachers did not have life work balance, I mean, they really didn't. They would go home with these mountains of essays, and that's just what they did. And they would mark them up. And, we just were writing all the time. And so I don't know if today's students even get that kind of practice on the K-12 side. But if they're doing a lot of at-home essays, I would guess that a certain number are going to get a little dependent on the AI. And in terms of like brainstorming ideas and organizing, like I said, I think it's a wonderful tool. Like I live with a bunch of people with dyslexia. My whole family, except me, is pretty much dyslexic. Yeah, this would have been a godsend. This
Yeah.
would have been Grammarly or any of these tools. When we were in college, if I edited my husband's papers, he'd get an A. If he just turned them in because I was busy, he'd get a C on a good day. And it was the same content. It's just it took him. When he was 25, it kind of clicked, but it took him a long time to figure that out. So these tools would have been amazing for English as a second language students. Amazing. I was speaking this week in office hours. I have a first gen ESL student who was struggling in biopsych because one of the things I make them do is they have to do a compare and contrast between the popular press article that's talking about a scholarly article, right? So you send students, undergrads, out into the neuroscience scholarly literature, and it's like jargon city. I don't know why people write that way. It's just so obscure. And so I was telling her, I said, look, what I would do is take that PDF you've got. Here we go, copyright infringement 101, upload it into the chat GPT and ask it to translate it into Spanish for you. Just do it. And she was funny. And I don't know how prevalent this is with students. She said, I've never used chat GPT. And I go, really? I kind of thought all of you were doing that. She goes, no. She said that some of her professors had sort of told them, if you do this, I'm going to kill you, kind of a threat, like a bolt of lightning will strike you where you stand. And that had just totally freaked her out. I said, well, in all realistic terms, this is going to be part of your work life. It's going to be part of your life. It's time to get in. It's time to get comfortable with it. So we actually talked about doing recipes. She was very excited about that because I do that a lot. I use it for recipes. It's kind of low stakes, no pressure.
Uh-huh. Well, but what about some of the long-term effects? Like we can't use slide rules anymore. I don't know anybody who can. Is that a problem? Does it matter?
No.
Or we rely on SPSS or other statistical software
I
to
would
perform these calculations now?
I would say we did all of the, we did, okay, so stats was rough. It's always rough.
Yeah.
But we computed our analyses of variance by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is something to that because you see where the numbers come from. In other words, one of the problems we have with AI is it's the proverbial behaviorist black box. You have some input and you have some output. And even the programmers can't tell you exactly what's happening, especially if you have a very complex network system. They can't tell you exactly how the machine is going from point A to point B. It's sort of a mystery there. And I think it is useful to see the process. It's like how do we get from this input to the output? But I don't think you have to do that all the time because it's hugely time consuming. And as long as you understand the concepts, it's just my students, when they do SPSS, they throw the numbers in and they're, very excited if something comes out 0.05. So we have to have that discussion. It's,
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, but your effect size is like 0.02.
Yeah.
So, so it's still a little black box to them. But I think we might just get into an information overload kind of situation. I think we're already there. I know that I feel like stuff is kind of going past me at warp speed, and especially in the neuroscience area. And you're like, whoa, I read that yesterday, and now it's different today. And so maybe the AI can help us deal with that, but maybe we won't, have we're going to be playing catch up. I don't know. It's an empirical question. We'll be seeing it.
Yeah. And just the long-term effects on, I know critical thinking is a term that's difficult to
Yeah.
define, but I've seen examples of people who interact with it all the time. There's one student in our lab in particular who she just consults it for everything. It's just constantly open, whether it be on her phone or her computers. And I don't see her losing any critical thinking ability. I see her maybe operating on a different kind of domain with those same skills, practicing those same skills. But, the question is more like, how can I best use ChatGPT to accomplish this task, as opposed to
Absolutely.
just how do I accomplish this task on my own?
And I think too that we're as professors in a position where we have to mentor, we have to model, we have to guide. Critical thinking without AI has always been a challenge for us. People, and there's some really good research in cognitive psych about that. People are sort of skewed into believing first. We're trusting by nature, and so we have to. If you're going to deal with misinformation, you have to, kind of mentor that and model it and teach it. And one of the discouraging things is that a lot of the outcome research on critical thinking efforts in college show no difference. The students still go out believing we use 10% of our,
Mhm.
brains, and it's very difficult to knock into that. But one of the things that I think is important is that students are learning that ChatGPT isn't always correct, and that you have to ask it for its references and why are you saying what you're saying. I did a search the other day on electroconvulsive therapy, and from my reading, there's some real concerns about ECT in terms of efficacy because you don't have gold standard placebo controlled trials very often because nobody's going to be willing to put patients under general, to be in a placebo condition, right? So it's
Mhm.
been very, very difficult to get a handle on how effective ECT really is. And the people who are doing that are saying it's not. So I asked ChatGPT just for fun, and it was glowing. It said, "This is the best thing since sliced bread. Sign up tomorrow. You're a little bit, go for it." I'm like, okay, what are we reading? Oh, Wikipedia. Okay. You know,
Mhm.
so in a way, if we handle this correctly, we should be able to give our students some really good kind of real world examples of why it's important to use critical thinking.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe providing your own background, and like you said with the article, like maybe if you upload an article, maybe create like a custom GPT. I've seen that. That seems to be pretty common.
Yes.
And then maybe you can kind of target them to stay sort of within those confines as opposed to who knows where its sources are going to come from.
Well, it's one of the things, I do that assignment with my biopsych students, the compare and contrast for a reason, because it's news to them that the media might be wrong. Okay. They're like, really? I go, yeah, look what you're asking the science writer to do. They're writers and they have to absorb, this fairly complex content from this article. And then you can't believe all the scholarly peer review is that's a topic for another day, isn't it, Joe?
Hmm.
We have some issues there, okay? And so not everything that makes it into the scholarly press is necessarily good. And so we have to be skeptical. And once you tell them that it's okay to be skeptical, they feel very empowered, like, oh, wow, I can do this. It's fun to watch. That's what keeps us busy, right? We like our students.
So maybe what are some lessons that you've learned in terms of classroom use of AI? If there was another instructor who you had to give advice to, what are some pointers?
Oh, I'd say just jump in and have fun. Be
Mhm.
be ready to make mistakes. And again, that's one of the things that, like Carol Dweck has lamented, is that some of our students are a little bit scared of being wrong, of making mistakes, but this is not the time. So again, if we're modeling that, we're co-learners, we're all in this together. We're going to make our mistakes together, and we're gonna learn from them. It's like, just jump in, try some stuff. I One of my favorite things that I'm trying right now is I don't know if we talked about this earlier, but I got a prompt from Harvard Education on how to turn ChatGPT into a virtual tutor.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's really cute. It asks you whether you're a professor or a student or a professional, and my students sent me their transcripts, and the language the chat GPT used with them was very different than how it talks to me. Mine is very formal, but theirs is like, I'm so pumped to be working with you today on this. It doesn't say that. It never says it's excited to work with me. It just says, what do you want today?
Mhm.
But it was really fun to see the students interact with it. I asked them to put in the prompt and then pick a concept from the current, unit that
Mhm.
was problematic. So it'd be something like visual receptive fields. That's the one I tested out because, you talk to anyone in S&P and we're, like, how do we teach? It's kind of like negative reinforcement and learning. It's like, how do we have to teach this, number one? And secondly, how do we get this across without confusion? So I thought, well, I'm going to pick something like that. And just, it was very good. It asks you, what do you already know about the topic? And, you kind of let it know, and then it'll come back. And then at the end, I asked the students to ask the AI to generate, like five challenging follow-up questions for them. And they were like, I can do that. And I go, absolutely. And so they were on it. But what was really funny is in one of my classes, we were doing psychological disorders. And so they were picking topics from that chapter. And it just, I was a little worried, Joe. It totally devolved into a virtual therapy session. So it's
Mhm.
supposed to be a tutor.
Mhm.
And then they started just pouring out their little hearts to this machine. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got to have a conversation about this because there are virtual therapists,
Yeah.
and there have been some horror stories, where they've kind of gone off the rails a little bit and told people to kill themselves. Or that one,
Mhm.
did you read about the one app that told the girl to kill her parents because they were cutting back her social media time?
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about
Not
that.
good.
I
Not
wonder,
good.
yeah, I don't know. Like, there are times when, like, I need to talk, and there's
Hmm.
no one to listen, or you wouldn't want anyone to listen because you're in a state. And I have found it helpful for that. In those moments where
Oh,
you're like, talk me
oh.
down. I'm feeling a little bit excited about this.
And
But
it does a
yeah,
good job.
it has. But of course, yeah, there are risks. Like, you don't want to make widespread recommendations to everyone because there will be those times when things don't go well.
Well, I think, it's kind of like autonomous cars. I'm actually looking forward to that. I would like to
Mhm.
just sit in my commute and just work,
Mhm.
instead of having to drive freeways in California. Um, just not for the faint of heart.
Mhm.
But we're going to have accidents, right? But we have accidents now. It's just going to be different accidents. And I think that you do have therapists who make mistakes. They're human, right? And so the AI is going to make mistakes too. They're just going to be kind of different. And so we have to figure out our tolerance. I think people are very much less tolerant of mistakes by the machine than they are the human. And we have to expect them. We have to expect the mistakes to happen.
Mhm. You can't hold the AI accountable the same way you can a person. And potentially, if an AI makes a mistake, it can scale maybe a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Will seem like a couple of risks.
Yeah. So, but I do think it's just moving so quickly. I mean, compared to when I first started looking at it, there was all the concern about the hallucinations and the
Mhm.
all the mistakes. And I'm just I think was it Regan who actually had some data on that? He said it had been cut down like by 50% in the last 6 months or something, and that was months ago.
Mhm.
I just am not seeing the errors I saw at the outset. So I don't know what they're doing to make it better. And I still wouldn't want my students just depending on that completely like for term papers or whatever. But I think it's getting very powerful very quickly.
Mhm. Are there any other, you mentioned that one assignment that you have in your classes, they kind of interact with the tutoring prompt and then
Yeah,
submit the transcript?
yeah. I really want to do more.
Hmm.
I just haven't quite figured out what that would look like. Are you running into people with some, is there like a place where, we can have these discussions, maybe with the Centers for Teaching and Learning? Our campus is pretty quiet on that, though. And I'm hoping that the CSU initiative will have like a repository of fun things to do with AI. My biggest concern is that I don't know what an employer is going to expect my students to know how to do with AI.
Yeah.
I don't have that connectivity, and I'm very curious about that. What are we supposed to be teaching them? What are they going to be asked to do when they get out? Because you want them to have an advantage, right? And hit the ground running in whatever they're doing.
Be interesting to talk to career centers. Maybe they'd have their finger on the pulse a little bit better.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know. I think we're all kind of scrambling right now. And maybe even the employers don't know. I'm sure some of them know more than others.
Hmm.
But you read all these headlines every day that, I think it was like Meta just let some very large number of their employees go like 5% or something. And then they're coming in to spend more time on AI. So yeah, what are your students supposed to do to avoid being replaceable? I don't
Hmm.
know. Are we replaceable? Not yet, I hope. I like what I do.
Hmm. I saw it was just like a social media meme where uh, this woman, she was describing like junior software engineers. Like, so you have this
Okay.
initial startup company, two people get together from Silicon Valley and decide to start a company, and they hire a bunch of junior engineers. And, eventually the junior engineers, they learn and they gain experience, and then they grow into senior engineers. And she said, but these days people are forming startups, and instead of junior engineers, they're trying to use AI. But then
Mm,
down the line, where are you going to get your senior engineers?
mm-hmm.
Because they needed to be junior engineers for a while and learning and that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
can you
I think
replace a
that's
senior engineer with AI? Maybe not as easily.
not yet. Well, I think that's kind of my concern with the cognitive offloading the whole process. It's like maybe I don't need to know how to use the slide rule,
Mhm.
but there are other things that are fairly foundational, and I'm very influenced by people like Benjamin Whorf. If you have the vocabulary, you can talk about the concept more effectively. And so, if our students start shortcutting, which I see them doing, they're shortcutting intro psych to a much greater degree than they are biopsych. It's kind of like the biopsych students are a little more experienced. I have a lot of health profession students in there. They know they're going to need to know this stuff, right? Whereas the intro psych, oh, it's intro psych, it's supposed to be fun. They're shortcutting the foundations. And if you don't have those foundations, how are you going to be that senior thinker in whatever field you go into? We all have to learn the vocabulary. We all have to learn the theories and the basic structure of the field in order to be able to think big things. And if that process starts getting shortcutted, is that a word? I'm speaking out of the coffee. But if we don't have that foundation, and I was having a conversation with my underachieving nephew, who's a hospitalist at Stanford. He got an MD, PhD out of Harvard, and he's in his late 30s now, and he was lamenting. He said the new residents and interns, and this is Stanford, Joe. He said they don't know anything. He said they don't know their basic biochemistry. They don't know their OChem. They're missing the basics. They're good at other things, but they don't have that foundation. He goes, I can't have a conversation with them. I don't know where to start. And that's not AI's fault. That's kind of the way we've maybe been moving already in education. But it is concerning to me. I don't know how we're going to encourage students to see the value of grunting through some of that statistics or whatever it is that we're going to need later on.
Yeah, those kind of long-term investments that do in the end pay off. How do you
Oh, yeah.
incentivize that in the short term?
Well, and I'm an optimist, and I have to tell you, I kind of share B.F. Skinner's dislike of the way we do education as a whole. I mean, when you look at the educational system, it just hasn't changed. Okay, so I have some fancy PowerPoints, I have Canvas, but I'm basically doing the same things I did when I was 23 years old teaching at Pasadena City College. I mean, it's embarrassing because so much has happened in that interim over the course of my career. And you could probably go back, 100, 150 years, and teaching just hasn't changed. We're doing this lockstep, you got all these eight-year-olds, they're all going to do the same thing no matter what. And maybe this is the kick in the seat we need. We have to start thinking more like that backward course design we were talking about in Louisville, kind of like, what are the outcomes and how do we get there? And it could look very, very different than what we're doing right this minute, and it could be very exciting to start thinking that way, and how do we get students to the point we want them and need them to be? I think that's really maybe an opportunity to innovate.
So
I hope.
backward design, that's a recommendation, some more like active learning in the classroom and sort of passive learning at
Well,
home.
it's more like what is the takeaway?
Mhm.
So forward design, okay, you get your textbook, you got some chapters, you got some weeks, right? You're gonna pick some chapters and test on them, you know. But the backward design is more like, okay, I've got this biopsych course. It's kind of like I'm sure you've heard Sue France give talks at conferences, and Sue always says that her example breaks my heart. She says, "What does my neighbor the plumber really need to know about the action potential?" And I'm like, I can say I got that. I can answer that. So we have to start thinking in those ways. It's like if I'm going to teach my students how an action potential works, in the back of my head, it should be very, very clear to me what they're supposed to be able to do now that they know what the action potential is. Or if I can't answer that question, I probably shouldn't be teaching it. So it's more like what are the takeaways? What do we expect students to be able to know and do at the end of our course? And then you backfill into, okay, we've got some assessments to see if they did that. And then we have some instruction that will prepare them for the assessments that will show that they can meet the goals that you've set for them. But I think we need a lot more of that and a lot less of the traditional approach. But the big barrier, and yeah, I go to a lot of teaching conferences, and nobody has time, Joe. It's like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be nice if our administrations would say, okay, y'all, you can just take a quarter off and fix all your classes, it's go, yay. But instead we're moving to in our campus, we're moving to year-round instruction. It's kind of going the other direction, like, oh, you guys aren't busy enough, let's give you something so you don't get bored. Yeah.
Because how are you changing let's circle back to those what was it, answer.ai and Quizzard, How have
Yeah.
you been forced to adapt to those kinds of things?
Well, I haven't adapted yet because it's still kind of new to me. I was sort of blindsided by that. What I was noticing is that I've taught for a lot of years,
Mhm.
and I know where my students are at, right? And when you give quizzes that typically are in the 78 to 82% average range, and all of a sudden your average is 95%, and they're taking 15 minutes, you know something different is going on. Looking at this going, wow, okay. And what breaks my heart is I do have students doing it the hard way. And so, they're going to pull their C, but they really probably know more
Mhm.
than the student who's getting the 95% using Answers AI or whatever it is they decided to use. And that troubles me. So I'm thinking about that. But I don't know. I think a lot of people are going back to in-person quizzes, even if they have online courses.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we have the facility at Cal Poly to do that, just haul, because I have 160, getting them all in the same place at the same time when they're enrolled in an asynchronous class, I think, no, that's not going to happen. Um, but it kind of reminds me of my own education. I took this lovely 12-unit graduate neuroanatomy course in the medical school at UCLA. That was
Mhm.
definitely a highlight of my graduate career. It was just really, really hard. And we did all oral exams.
Yeah.
So you would make an appointment and it would be you against three professors, and they would just for you with questions. My first question is, Laura, go to the board and draw a paved circuit. And I'm going, draw? I don't draw. I can talk
Mhm.
about it. So, no.
Mhm.
I survived, but it was grim. I
Yeah.
can draw a paved circuit now. I can do that.
I've been
I learned to
wondering.
do that.
I've been wondering if AI could be used to like assess those oral exams or something like that. If, there's
Yeah,
a way for
because,
instructors to
well,
assess in a
that
consistent,
would be great
fair way.
because, again, looking at the time constraints that we
Exactly.
normally have, I don't want to do 160 interviews several times a quarter. That would be really traumatic for all of us, right? I would not get anything else done. But if you could somehow have the student interact with the AI in a kind of real time um, setting and then share that transcript with you. I don't know if you've ever heard Ben Carter speak on AI. Have you caught any of his
I don't
talks?
know.
Oh, he did one at NITOP in January that was just really, really excellent. And he uses the verbal facility, the voice facility. I have not experimented much with that. I type things.
Mhm.
But he was doing like clinical interviews. So he would simulate a patient or a client for his clinical students using the voice commands. And you could do that with some kind of, but I don't know. I'd have to look at it to see how it transcribes. I mean, if it doesn't transcribe, then what are you going to grade? But then you'd want to have the AI do some of the grading, wouldn't you? Could you do that?
Like that's the question because you're generating a lot
Yeah.
of personalized content for every student,
Yeah.
and maybe you're creating too much work for yourself. So you would hope that you'd be able to get the AI to handle it consistently, fairly.
Well, one of the things the AI does the best for
Mhm.
faculty is make rubrics. I mean, it's
Mhm.
awesome at making rubrics. So maybe it can reverse. If it can make a rubric, maybe it can grade a rubric. I don't know. That would be fun to try. I
Yeah,
think I'll try
maybe.
that. I have to do something, Joe. What I'm doing now is not effective and it's not fair. It's not bringing me joy. So I'm stuck for the quarter, right?
Mhm.
But I definitely will be looking for some alternatives in the spring, definitely. And so if you run across anything, let me know. Okay. I do like the idea of having some kind of uploaded. I wonder if you could have students like upload some kind of recorded video.
Mhm.
Certainly they could script that, but they'd still have to do it and then have the AI assess it somehow, maybe.
Yeah. I'd imagine that you could break it down into text and then from there. But yeah, it's just that consistency, and then, there are some issues with fairness and equity,
Yeah.
you know, but maybe students could always have the option to have a human regrade as sort of a
Yes.
fallback
Well,
for sure.
that's kind of, what you do with peer, at least that's the way I run peer assessment anyway. I do a
Mhm.
lot of peer assessment. And so the students have the opportunity to dispute if they feel like the peers have not graded them accurately. And then that calls me in and I can make whatever. I don't always change it. Sometimes the peer evaluators are absolutely correct and the student just doesn't like the grade. But I do have the opportunity to come in. So it'd be pretty easy to do that. It's like if you don't like what the AI is doing, then set up a flag and, flag the professor to come in and take a closer look. I spot check too, just to make sure. So that's already in place, that part, I think. We already know how to do that.
And that's not a bad way to frame it either, is kind of like a peer review sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, I may experiment with, I'll let you know how I do, right? I might
Yeah.
experiment with that. I also want to just look at more creative ways of assessing. I just I don't like the objective, you know, 50 questions in 50 minutes thing. It just seems kind of, I don't know, very old fashioned and not very effective. And I'm trying to talk my publisher, they're still paying people to do test banks. I go, why? Maybe if I show
Mm.
them this add-in, do you think that'll convince them? Like you're wasting your time? Because I mean, those test banks hit the internet in about 15 seconds. They're just out there.
Yeah.
So I just think we need something else to ask students to do to demonstrate what they know. And I'm not
Mhm.
sure what that's going to look like.
Like an AI assessment at depth sounds appealing, where, it can ask you questions, have kind of an exchange.
Yeah,
Sounds
kind of like
nice.
the tutor. Only, I wonder if you could set that up, like have some pre ordained questions. And I think it timestamps too, doesn't it? So it's not like they can take half an hour to go look up their answer.
It can.
Might be,
Mhm.
yeah. So you could basically set up like the tutor, only instead of tutoring, you would specifically prompt it to ask a series of questions. And then the student could submit the transcript. It's worth a try. I can try it. I can give extra credit and let students do that instead of their quiz or something.
Yeah, because it is heartbreaking what you describe, and I've heard it before where a lot of people will use AI to complete an exam or a quiz, and then the people who don't are kind of penalized because
They
they're
are
going to
very
get a little bit
penalized.
lower than,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think, like my student who said she was afraid of using, because the students don't know the rules. So I think rule number one is when we come into the classroom, we have to make it very, very clear what our personal take is on the use of AI. I think that should be very, very transparent to your students. It's like, well, I'm not an English composition professor, so here are the things I want you to do with it. Here are the things I don't want you to do with it.
Mhm.
And that way, but it would be useful, I think, if we had some kind of, I don't want a dictated policy from some central admin because that isn't necessarily going to fit what I do and what the next professor does and so on. It should be, a lot very flexible. But it would be nice if we had some kind of, maybe with this CSU AI initiative, we'll have some kind of, you know, general policy that we can discuss with students day one.
Yeah,
Here's how we need you to use it, and here are the things we don't want you to do.
yeah.
Not that that guarantees it. I think they're always the ones, it's like I have colleagues who are very masterful at catching cheaters, in Scantron tests and so on. They're very vigilant. They kind of are, stalking the testing room.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't go to graduate school to do that. That you know, and I sort of feel like at some level, if they're going to cheat, it's on them. I am sensitive to the equity issue. But
Mhm.
you're spending all that money, you know, to get an education. And if that's what you want to do with it, on you.
Maybe that's the best way to handle it, is just to provide compelling reasons to your students for why it's in your best interest to
Yeah,
learn this
I
stuff
think
on
we
your
need to
own.
do a better job of selling. It's kind of like when my kids were little, they'd ask, well, why do I have to go to school?
Mhm.
And a lot of parents just say, well, because you have to. I say so, or it's the law, or something like that. And my answer, not that I was a perfect parent, you can talk to my kids. I'm sure they'll give you the whole story. But no, they're good girls. I really enjoy them. They're good girls. But I would always say things like, well, if you understand the world better, that's what you're going to learn to do at school, is understand the world. It's less scary. And you're probably scared of stuff because you're a kid, and the more you know, the less scared you are, I think. Although then there are
Mhm.
those asteroids. It's too much information, isn't it, Joe?
Mhm.
I don't really need to know about all those asteroids that are like coming towards us. Like,
Yes.
why are they telling me this? So, like, I don't need to know this.
Should I be concerned? I don't know. But I have to
What are you
click the
gonna
link.
do?
'Cause,
Yeah, I did too. I did too. It's like, what is that?
wait a minute. Is it this time?
Or we think it might or
Mhm.
might not, or and you're like, why are we having this conversation, right? It's like,
Yeah.
tell me if it's gonna come down and I'll do some stuff. Like my family, But yeah, it's an interesting world we live in. But yeah, and they always say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but I think more knowledge is always a good thing. And I do think we have to sell our students on that.
Yeah.
It's like, you're here for a reason, not just because your parents want you to be here.
Mhm.
Um, and let's make the most of it. I wish we could kind of transfer our brains into the 18-year-old, right?
Oh, just
Because
wait.
I mean,
Just
because
wait.
there's so many things I would have done differently. It's like, how did I let that go by? How did I let that opportunity go by? I mean, I was like this, just in a wonderful time at UCLA. There was just so much going on, and you could only do so much. I mean, in my defense, it was like there was so much going on. But I think, God, how did I not take a class with that person?
Mhm.
That's terrible.
We could only go back.
So now you can resurrect people with AI. Have you seen the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg? And they have a
Haven't seen that one.
oh my gosh, look it up. They have virtual Salvador Dali, and he's in a kiosk, and they actually went back to his photographs and his voice recordings, and they have made him literally come to life, and he talks to the visitors about his journey and about some of the pieces, and it's a different talk
Hmm.
for everybody who comes by. And then at the end, you can take a selfie. He'll take a selfie with you. So yeah. And there's also an interesting this is not education, so I'm getting a little off topic. I apologize, but it is AI. There's a similar thread about grief management through that same kind of process, almost having that person there to talk to you. And of course, the empirical data is behind. We don't know what the parameters are, what makes that potentially helpful, and where could it definitely be kind of
Cause more
creepy.
harm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But people are doing some, again, it's really hard to kind of keep a handle on all of this stuff. It's like people are doing so much amazing stuff. And that's why I like that there's an AI for that site. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at
Yeah.
that. They do spam you. They spam you. They just send you
Hmm.
constant emails, and you're like, "There's too much.
Yeah. Hundreds and
There's too
thousands of
much."
tools.
You know?
Hmm.
But people are really doing some amazing stuff. It'll be interesting to see where we're in 5 years, 10 years. Who knows? Where do you think we'll be?
Like it'll be, I'm sure we'll be all right, is I think as much as I can say.
Waiting. I'm waiting for the robot that will fold my laundry and maybe
Yeah.
clean the dog hair off the floor. I'd be willing to pay serious money for that, you know. But we have just so many uses. Like I was looking at these, I don't know if you've seen them. There's some very realistic robot companion pets for people with dementia.
Hmm. That's
Wow.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And they're very, I mean, you got to kind of do a double take, like they're getting very realistic in their movement and behavior. And so, who knows? It's going to be just a really interesting place. And of course, the big challenge is to get our students where they, because their lifespan is going to be very much affected by this, and it's going to be really important for us to get them off to a good start, I think.
Well, I think that's a great spot to end, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. No, I hope this is what you wanted to talk about. I tend to ramble a little bit, my students say, but it's more fun.
No, this has been great. I appreciate you having you on, Laura.
Well, it's fun. And I'm still working on that assessment. I'm going to look at that assessment
Mhm.
idea, for the WPA thing. I think I'd love to have something I could demo, just like
Yeah,
that'd be cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I'll work on that.
AI assessments. I think that's a next chapter. I think that's kind of coming down the pike.
I'd like to do
Hmm.
that in my
Well,
spare time. Uh, I'm sure you have a lot too. I shouldn't complain.
I think we're all in academia. We all feel that pain.
Yeah, and I keep thinking, why am I so busy now? I should be less busy, but it just seems like more stuff every year. It's like there's more to do somehow. And
Mhm.
it's a challenge,
Mhm.
but it's still fun. I still am having a good time. So
Good. Well, great talking to you, Laura.
always a pleasure, Joe. And let me know if you need anything else and watch out for that answer AI thing.
Yeah. Well, have a great afternoon. See you
You
later.
too. All right. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to PsychSessions AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do like, subscribe, or leave a review. All of our episodes, as well as the PsychSessions newsletter, can be found by visiting psychsessions.org. See you next time.